Welcome to 99 at 25. I am John Brooks, and we are going to be looking at all of the month of September. In this episode, we have some fun stuff to talk about this time around. I'm once again doing a full month episode because it's September, and I went back to work this month, and so I have been very busy. So I'm going to have to dump it all on you in one go. Not a ton of stuff necessarily was happening in the world, but if you're into entertainment news, there were some fun things to talk about this month, so we will get to it. Joining me this episode once again, recently had on talking about Woodstock 99, is Dan Colón. Dan, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, John. Always a pleasure to be on here and chatting with you about 1999, the time of my childhood that I don't remember as well as some folks.
Because you were like 12.
I was 12.
Right.
So I wasn't necessarily plugged into, the goings on of the world. I mean, Everything before 9/11, I'm just like, did any of it really matter? I didn't really pay much attention to things. And then 9/11 happened and suddenly everything seemed important. So
I understand that. Yeah, some of the things we're going to talk about today is definitely pop culture things that you know about in the interim. And some of them are going to be things that have long been forgotten, including movies and television shows that nobody remembers. So we're going to start into the movie releases of September. Now, I said in the last episode that the movies of August, or especially late August, are always interesting because it's when studios dump those movies that they know aren't going to be box office successes. And sometimes you get some hidden gems, and sometimes you get some truly awful ones. So you got your Dudley Do-Rights, or, if you're this year, your The Crow remakes, and this sort of thing.
Yeah, August is kind of like the January of the summer, right?
It's exactly what it is. Yeah, it's the late January of the summer is what August is. And September is interesting because sometimes September is like the riskier movies that kind of might pay off. And sometimes they start sort of, limited releasing the ones that are Oscar bait. And we'll talk about a few of those in a second as well. But we get off to a bang on September the 1st with Chill Factor, starring Cuba Gooding Jr. and Skeet Ulrich. A movie that I remember and we have not covered on the show, and is probably going to be one of the last movies we cover on the show because, oh boy, Chill Factor is a bad movie. And in addition to that, Outside Providence, the lesser known of the Farrelly brothers movies, but one with something of a cult following, based on Peter Farrelly's novel of the same name, the semi-autobiographical novel of his time at the Kent School in Rhode Island, starring Sean Hattasey, Amy Smart, Alec Baldwin, John Abrahams, and the late Jonathan Brandis, shortly before he died a few years later. I know I've seen Outside Providence. I don't remember if I liked it, but that's all I got.
I have no memory of either of these movies.
Having no memory of Chill Factor is okay. It's fine to not remember Chill Factor. It's genuinely terrible.
Yeah, I think this is one of those situations where my age definitely was the factor. I mean, these are both R-rated movies with like classic 90s casts, I guess you could say. Yep. Skeet Ulrich definitely popping up in there. Jonathan Brandis, I loved him in a couple things that I've seen, but like, yeah, I don't even remember seeing trailers for these.
I remember the Chill Factor trailer, and it's one of those movies along the lines of Snakes on a Plane, where it's like, this can't be real. Like, is this real? This can't be real. If I remember right, it involves a like a runaway ice cream truck and a terrorist, something. Anyway,
okay.
I don't know. We'll watch it for the show sometime when we're really, really bored.
Is it like a buddy cop movie?
It's like a buddy, yeah. It's more like a buddy, like thwart the ice cream terrorists movie or something. I
like a Lethal Weapon ripoff almost.
I think so. Although I think it's not supposed to be like funny.
Oh, that's.
I think it's because the Dan LaFontaine trailer voice for it was, chill factor, right? So not,
yeah.
I don't know.
It sounds
Maybe I'll
like
find the trailer and put it into this episode so you guys can hear what I'm talking about. But
it sounds like a movie trailer that would be at the beginning of like Tropic Thunder. Like the Ben Stiller character would be doing a movie called Chill Factor or some shit like that.
Actually, do you want to watch the trailer? Let's get the trailer. I'm going to share it with you. See how much I remember. Let's see if like what I just said to you has any bearing on what the trailer says. Go ahead, give that a watch.
Okay.
Here we go. It's a Morgan Creek production.
Music.
Prep the field for detonation at noon.
10 years ago, the U.S. government created a secret weapon that could remain completely harmless until its temperature reached 50 degrees.
Like speed for degrees.
Is 5 miles.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's speed, but with like a chemical weapon.
The man responsible prayed
David
it
Paymer.
would never fall into the wrong hands.
Let's find the prize.
Unfortunately,
Where is it?
it's about to be handed off
Doc, you have to take this to Fort Magruder.
Has to be kept cold.
to a short-order cook
Morning.
and an ice cream delivery man.
So it's like a wacky buddy comedy.
Yeah, like this
Weapon.
mismatch. Like not even cops.
Now, all that stands between
I don't think I ever got to the comedy part.
You have no idea.
See, this premise would work so much better if it had been played as a comedy. Because you know what? I could see Cuba Gooding Jr. and Skeet Ulrich having good chemistry, like, in that way. But to play it totally straight, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, the trailer does kind of play up kind of a goofy, like, tone.
Long trailer.
It is a long trailer. Who made this thing over 2 minutes?
Stay back. I'm taking your boat. He's a dangerous man. He's crazy. I'm crazy. I'm crazy.
This fall,
Yeah, I gotta watch this. Yep.
You're right. It's Lethal Weapon.
back.
Yeah, it's like a Lethal Weapon with a like a Speed-esque, hook.
Yeah.
Which on paper doesn't sound terrible.
No, it doesn't sound terrible. True.
Kill him now.
Like, yeah, I would have gone to see that if I was 20 years old in 1999.
Put your hand in my pocket. We're about to die. You want me to do some freaky?
Oh, and a little gay panic at the end. Why not?
Yeah, I gotta have a little of that.
There you go. That's Chill Factor. Anyway, yeah. Okay. Watch that one again sometime. September the 10th, Best Laid Plans, directed by Mike Barker with Josh Brolin, Alessandro Nivola, and Reese Witherspoon, who's everywhere, in addition to Terrence Howard. Reese Witherspoon, big 1999 presence, as we know. Again, have not seen that one, but as I remember, it is some sort of like, sort of B-tier, dark, thrillery type thing. What is widely considered one of the worst movies of the year or of all time, Love Stinks, comes out September 10th as well. Directed by Jeff Franklin in his directorial debut. Jeff Franklin, for those of you guys who grew up in the 80s and 90s, is the guy who created and produced Full House. And this was his foray into cinema, and also his final foray into cinema. Starring French Stewart, Bridget Wilson, Bill Bellamy. Remember Bill Bellamy from MTV? Tyra Banks, Steve Hittner, Jason Bateman, Tiffany Thiessen. Jason Bateman, by the way, during the period of time when he was like not a big celebrity. Tiffany Thiessen, Montrose Haggins, don't even know who that is, and a bunch of other names I don't recognize, aside from John O'Hurley, who's great.
Yeah, I remember for a little period of time, French Stewart was they were trying to make him a movie star, if I remember. He was on Third Rock from the Sun, and they're like, okay, this guy's got appeal, let's put him in movies.
And then he was in Inspector Gadget 2. And
that's right. That poor guy.
So, yeah, that's a terrible movie. Yeah, it's a good relic, though, of the time. So the period of time between about 1990 and basically Arrested Development, where Jason Bateman was making just terrible movies and was not getting good work. And this is one such case. All right. Also, same day, two movies that we have covered on the show. Stigmata, directed by Rupert Wainwright, with Patricia Arquette, Gabriel Byrne, Jonathan Pryce, Nia Long, Rade Cerbergia, and Enrico Colantoni. And Stir of Echoes, directed by David Coep, with Kevin Bacon, Catherine Irby, Ileana Douglas, Jennifer Morrison, and Kevin Dunn, and some other people. Have I talked to you about either of those movies before? I feel like
I can't remember if I was on the episode or not. I'm pretty sure we've talked about Stigmata in some context, whether on the show or not. It's one of those movies, like, I have seen Stigmata, and like 90s horror has a following. Like I know lots of people who really are into that, like, late 90s, early 2000s era of horror movies. And this is like pure that. If that's your thing, this is going to be your jam also.
Mm-hmm.
I just distinctly remember a lot of inflatable furniture in this movie. That was the one thing that stuck out to me. Is
There's
like
a copious amount of inflatable furniture in that movie. And a score by Billy Corgan. So...
Yeah, I remember enjoying it. I mean, it is over the top 90s horror, but for what it is, I kind of dig it.
Yeah, it's absurd and stupid, but it is also very stylish and kind of hard to not sort of like in a weird sort of you go get 'em kid spunky sort of way.
Right.
Speaking of rip-offs of Lethal Weapon, I forgot how much black dude and like wacky white guy was a genre.
Oh yeah.
Because September 17th is Blue Streak, directed by Les Mayfield, starring Martin Lawrence as the black guy and Luke Wilson as the white guy, with Dave Chappelle and Peter Green and William Forsythe and some other people as well. I've actually never seen that movie. I remember that being kind of a cult hit.
Oh, I watched the shit out of Blue Streak.
Yeah, I think if you loved Martin Lawrence at the time, which a lot of people did, Blue Streak was your jam.
Yeah, so I wasn't watching Martin in the 90s. I didn't discover Martin until like after Martin Lawrence had made the jump to movies.
Bad Boys,
I guess,
right?
Yeah, this is post Bad Boys, which I hadn't seen yet because it was rated R and I was too young for it. But Blue Streak was PG-13, so I was watching like Big Mama's House, Blue Streak, Black Knight.
What's on with him and Tim Robbins? Right, you know what I'm talking about, right? Where it's like a bank heist. I don't know.
You're referring to Nothing to Lose?
Nothing to Lose. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one, but it was like, I forget what the first one was. It might have been Blue Streak, unless Big Mama's House came out first.
Okay, gotcha.
No, Blue Streak came out first. So it's probably where I started watching Martin Lawrence movies. But yeah, they were on HBO all the time. So I was just watching Blue Streak every single time it came on TV. And to this day, when as I'm doing my Duolingo, I'm still thinking about Tengo el gato los pantalones. Like that one line of dialogue still sticks in my memory for some reason. But so this was sort of my entry point to Martin Lawrence, for better or worse.
Wow, we should bump that one up on the schedule then, because I've heard a bunch of people mention that movie. Also, the same day, a much less popular movie, the sort of baffling passion project of Bruce Willis adaptation of Kurt Vonnegut's Breakfast of Champions, starring Bruce Willis, Albert Finney, Nick Nolte, Barbara Hershey, Glenn Headley, Lucas Haas, Omar Epps, Vicki Lewis, Buck Henry, Jake Johansson, Will Patton, Owen Wilson, who will be back again in a second, Allison Eastwood, Michael Jai White, Michael Clark Duncan, and Kurt Vonnegut himself. This movie was a massive failure. It was a critical disaster, and it has never been released digitally to this day. So if you want to go watch it, you got to get a physical copy of it somewhere, somehow. I never actually did see it, but I really wish someone would release it to streaming, because I have to see just how much of a disaster it actually is. It is a legendary disaster of a movie. So
yeah, it's a hell of a cast they assembled.
Sure is.
Was this Bruce Willis's passion project, or was it Alan Rudolph, the director?
I think it was Bruce Willis who was like, it was either him or Nick Nolte. It was one of the two of them who was like hell bent on getting that movie made.
This is such weird casting to put Bruce Willis as the star of Breakfast of champions. Like I love Kurt Vonnegut. I've read that book, and I cannot picture Bruce Willis in the lead role of that story.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. No, I definitely have to see it at some point. If you have seen it, write in and let me know what you think. But I think it's fair to say that of the movies featuring the Wilson brothers that opened that day, Luke is the winner of those two movies.
I would say so.
And then also on September the 17th, a movie that we will be getting to in the relatively near future, finally, For Love of the Game, the third in Kevin Costner's baseball trilogy, with Kevin Costner, Kelly Preston, John C. Reilly, Jenna Malone, Brian Cox, J.K. Simmons, William Newman, Daniel Day Kim, Vin Scully, Steve Lyons, and a whole bunch of other random baseball-y people who show up.
And directed by my beloved Sam Raimi.
Sam Raimi. Yeah, a very un-Sam Raimi kind of movie, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's one that I haven't seen.
Oh, really?
I fell in love with Sam Raimi as a horror filmmaker.
Sure.
So like that's the Sam Raimi I know, and then actually I discovered him with Spider-Man, like most people my age, I think. Then I discovered Evil Dead later, but yeah, For Love of the Game is one of those movies that sort of eluded me, and so I need to watch it just because I love baseball and I love Sam Raimi. But Kevin Costner is not very. I don't have a whole lot of love for him as an actor.
Oh, I fucking adore Kevin Costner.
Do
Kevin
you?
Costner
Okay,
is one of my favorite actors ever. And
So like I find that I love a lot of the movies he does. I love Field of Dreams. I love was the Bull Durham was great. Like so. I like his movies, but there's something about him that rubs me weird. I don't think he's a bad actor. I think it's just like what he's got a thing, right? Like some actors have a thing, like George Clooney has a thing, and people either like it or they don't. And I just don't love Costner for some reason.
If there was an American version, and I mean this in every possible way, if there's an American version of Kenneth Branagh, it's Kevin Costner, right?
I could see that.
Because he is so indulgent, he is so full of himself, but like, man, can he make a fucking movie when he wants to? And his performances in movie, I mean, I don't love JFK, but like he's phenomenal in that movie.
Sure.
One of my favorite movies is A Perfect World, directed by Clint Eastwood, that he is just, it's one of the most spectacular performances. He's fantastic. And yeah, he's very hit and miss, and sometimes he like lets his own indulgence get in the way of everything else, but no, I think Kevin Costner is one of the finest actors of his generation, and I fundamentally like was often just kind of misused. For sure.
Yeah, I don't spend my nights, seething in hatred over Kevin Costner. Like it's just like it's like certain bands, I'm just like, people love that band, and I just don't get it. And it's kind of how I am with Kevin Costner. He's always like monologuing, and I'm just like, oh, there he goes again. He's just waxing philosophical about whatever. He does it in so many of his movies, and I'm like, come on, man.
He does love baseball, though. So.
He does love baseball.
September the 24th, Double Jeopardy, starring Tommy Lee Jones, Ashley Judd, Bruce Greenwood, Annabeth Gish, and Spencer Treat Clark, as well as, interestingly enough, Bruce Campbell. So Bruce Campbell has a movie coming out the week after one of Sam Raimi's movies comes out. I don't know if Bruce Campbell's in For Love of the Game. I have to watch it again. He probably makes a cameo at some point, you would have to assume.
One would assume.
I don't know that he actually is. I don't know. I guess we'll wait and find out. Yeah, that's a popular. Yeah, there was the whole sort of Ashley Judd crime thriller genre was also a genre for a time. With that and like Kiss the Girls and the other Along Came a Spider, whatever it is, right, with Morgan Freeman.
Oh, yep.
Et cetera. Also that day, Guinevere, the directorial debut of Audrey Wells, who had just come off a success of the screenwriter of The Truth About Cats and Dogs a couple of years earlier, starring Stephen Ray and one of my favorites, Sarah Polley, who also was all over the place in 1999. Recent It Girl, Jean Smart, Gina Gershon, Carrie Preston, and a bunch of other people. Sandra Oh appears in that movie as well. Another one that I haven't seen, and I love Sarah Polley, so I don't know why I haven't seen it, but that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast. Also, the 24th, the critically panned Jacob the Liar, trying to cash in on all of that Life is Beautiful, sweet, sweet Holocaust dramedy money, starring Robin Williams, who had a very weird 1999, and this is just one of the reasons why. The Millennial Man, is that what it's called?
Bicentennial Man.
Bicentennial Man, that's the one, is also on that list. But also Alan Arkin, Liv Schreiber, Hannah Taylor-Gordon, Bob Balaban, Armin Mueller-Stahl, and Mark Margolis, as well as the late Michael Jeter. Mark Margolis, listeners probably know best these days as Henry Salamanca from the Breaking Bad universe. So there you
R.I.P.
go. The late Mark Margolis, who also plays the Pope in End of Days, also a 1999 movie. So there you have it. Owen Wilson is back, also on the 24th, in The Minus Man, a weird thriller-y thing with him and Janine Garofalo. Brian Cox, Mercedes Rule, Dwight Yoakam, Dennis Haysbert, Sheryl Crow, Eric Mabius, and one of my favorites, John Carroll Lynch. So I might have to see that one at some point as well. And one of the true undiscovered gems of movie that I have loved for a long time and that I would often put on my employee recommendation shelf at the video store when I worked there, Lawrence Kasdan's Mumford, starring Lauren Dean, Hope Davis, Jason Lee, Alfre Woodard, Mary McDonnell, Martin Short, David Paymer, Pruitt Taylor Vince, Jane Addams, Zoe Deschanel, Ted Danson, Kevin Tighe, Dan Ivey, Jason Ritter, Elizabeth Moss, Robert Stack, Simon Helberg, Kelly Monaco, Kirk Fox, and a bunch of other people as well. That's a really, really great movie. If you've never seen it before, I highly, highly recommend Mumford.
That is an incredible cast.
Yeah, Lawrence Kasdan could put together a cast.
But I'm looking at some of these names. Were they like stars at that point? You know, it was Zoe Deschanel.
No, Zoe Deschanel was not. So she kind of broke through because of Almost Famous, which was a year later.
Sure.
She obviously, her family's worked in Hollywood her whole life, whatever. And, so she comes from a Hollywood family, but Hope Davis is someone who is always and still is always like a indie actor, sort of an indie darling. So is Lauren Dean. So is Alfre Woodard to some extent. Mary McDonnell, like sort of an actor's actor. I guess Ted Danson is kind of the biggest name there, right? Jason Ritter wasn't really famous yet. It was still his dad who was more famous. So there you go. But interestingly, David Paymer sort of begins and ends the month with Chill Factor and then Mumford. So there you go. David Paymer bookends to the month, because of course the last movie that came out that month was on the 28th, and that was on home video, and that was Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet Frankenstein, a movie that is right up your alley. As a guy who does a podcast about Frankenstein and stuff. So whose podcast logo is Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
That's monster, I should say.
So I guess we'll have to add that to the list.
You really should.
Right? People always ask us, are you going to do Monster Squad? Are you going to do, Bram Stoker's Dracula? Are you going to do Hammer Dracula? And I'm like, yeah, we're going to do all that eventually, but we're like, our focus is specifically Universal Studios and how they treated these characters. Like, that's our priority. And then once we catch up to them, then we're free to kind of branch off and do whatever the hell we want. Sure. I'm pretty sure our listeners will riot. They'll, literally get torches and pitchforks if we don't start talking about the Hammer films from the 50s and 60s. But, so Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet Frankenstein is going to be way down on that list. But
you should do it first. Really push them off.
That's
keep the audience angry. That's our motto, Just do things to,
just to establish dominance.
I was kind of thinking maybe we would do it for just a Halloween special this year. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll invite you and Mike on to.
That would be fun.
Podcast instead.
I know Mike would love
it. We'll see how it stacks up agast the original Frankenstein.
Or Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. How does it
much
compare?
A 1-to-1 equivalency.
Amazing.
Anyways, also going on though in the movies, as I mentioned earlier, is some film festival debuts of some of the movies that would go on to be the big award winners and or award flirters of the year. September the 2nd being John Malkovich premieres in a limited capacity, starring, of course, John Cusack, Cameron Diaz, and John Malkovich, directed by Spike Jonze, a movie that we covered way early in the podcast.
Yeah,
and then sadly, September the 8th, American Beauty premieres in Los Angeles, directed by Sam Mendes, and starring, of course, Kevin Spacey and Annette Bening and Thora Birch and Wes Bentley and some other people, including Chris Cooper. I don't know. Fuck that movie. And then September the 10th, Fight Club premieres at the Venice Film Festival, directed by David Fincher, and starring, of course, Edward Norton and Brad Pitt. And again, we have covered both of those movies as well, but we'll talk about them a little bit more when they actually are released on these episodes. That is sometime in, I think, October or November. So we'll get around to speaking about this movies more. But the Oscar bait is already dangling on the hook for the voters, and that's sort of how they do it. Is, you know, they take the ones they think are going to win all the awards, and they release them in one theater in Los Angeles or at some film festival somewhere, and the rest of us get all hyped for these big movies. Anyways, that's what's going on with movies at the time. In music, it is a pretty big month for music. Was this a thing where like September was when I think it was, because I remember buying a lot of like albums in the fall, and I kind of feel like a lot of albums came out in September. I think they released
I never really thought about music releasing in September, October as being like a thing. But it would make sense to me, considering that the consumers for new music tend to skew younger. So if school's starting, new music's coming out. So like, kids are going to buy it and talk about it at school, and like I could see that being a good marketing strategy. But I never really thought of it.
Yeah, and like, you're sort of, it's like a lot of the stuff that comes out, like a lot of the poppy stuff, of course, came out in the summer, and a lot of that is in the form of singles. But like a lot of the stuff that's on this list is more like the alt rock stuff, and it's like, kids going back to school, and it's getting to the fall, and they're getting all sad and and angry, and they want the ennui. But yeah, you look at the list of what came out in September, and it is huge, and I couldn't even sort of fit it all in my summary here. But notable releases include albums from Folk Implosion, Steve Vai, Gomez, Iggy Pop, Ben Harper, Supergrass, Yes, Brian McKnight, Nine Inch Nails, Mark Lanigan, Tori Amos, Paula Cole, Elvis Costello, ZZ Top, Indigo Girls, Creed, Stereolab, and Sting with the release of his album Brand New Day. But the big ones: Mark Anthony releases his eponymous debut English language album, and Soundgarden's Chris Cornell releases Euphoria Morning, his solo debut. Speaking of R.I.P., and that is a great album, and one of the great tragedies of Chris Cornell's career is how underappreciated his solo career was, because frankly, I think the music that he did on his own is better than anything Soundgarden ever did.
Bold statement.
But two favorites for the nation's alt pop girlfriends and indie pop girlfriends, respectively. Guster's big breakthrough album, Lost and Gone Forever, featuring Barrel of a Gun and Fa Fa on the one hand, and the Magnetic Fields 3 CD album, 69 Love Songs, featuring 69 different love songs in often wildly different styles, all written by the band's lead singer, Stephen Merritt. You familiar with either of those albums?
Yes. So the Guster album I listened to, I didn't discover it until college. I made a friend in college who was a huge Guster fan, so I decided to dive into their catalog. And so that album, Lost and Gone Forever, was kind of the one people told me to check out. So I had that on repeat for a while. Really loved that album. A lot of this stuff I wasn't listening to actively in September of 1999, because I don't know if I've mentioned it on this show before, but like 1999 was the fall of 1999 was my transition out of private school into public school.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't really in tune with a lot of pop music. And so we had these Friday night like casual dances, and I think it was like the school just giving us a place to go on a Friday night, and a safe place to be. And so we'd have these dances, and the DJ was playing a lot of this stuff there, and that's kind of how I kind of clued in on a lot of what was popular at the time.
Yeah.
So I definitely remember a lot of the more pop music, but have since gone on to discover the Fragile, Nine Inch Nails,
Yep.
and some other albums that you mentioned. Creed's Human Clay was a big one for me in high school, unfortunately.
Yep.
So like, yeah, I wasn't actively listening to this music in that way, but again, have since come to rediscover some of it.
Yeah, Guster ended up being one of those very divisive bands that was, I mean, they're kind of like fundamentally annoying because they're such like music school kids. They're like a musicians band, and it's all it's so very composed, and like multi-part harmonies and all of that sort of thing. But like, yeah, they were an incredibly impressive alt pop band. I saw them play live. Their drummer plays without sticks. He uses his hands the entire time.
Yeah.
It is absolute madness. And like watching him do it is, because I when I saw them play, I was sitting sort of at one of the sort of like 3/4 angles. So I had a really good view of like him playing the drums, like from that sort of aerial view. And it was just wild. I mean, it was just, magnetic to watch him play. And like a song like Barrel of the Gun, I mean, it uses a typewriter as like percussion. Like that's so fucking cool. Like, and I get why they annoy people. And like, I'm not a huge fan of Guster, but like Guster was just one of those bands that just, if you liked them, you weren't cool. Like they were just aggressively sort of uncool. And people who liked them did tend to be like very annoyingly into them, but like objectively they were a good band. I'm not sure if they're still doing stuff together, actually.
I believe they are.
Are they really? Okay, cool.
As far as I know, yeah. I don't remember the last time they put out an album.
Yeah.
I haven't like followed along. Oh, they put out an album this year.
There you go.
So
see, I got my finger on the pulse of pop culture. There it is. Yep, I knew that.
So I'm looking at a list of albums that were
all
released.
That stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm looking at a list of albums that were released in September of '99. I don't think you mentioned it, but I wanted to shout it out because it's an incredible album. And again, another one I discovered way later, John Prine's "In Spite of Ourselves." John Prine has become one of my all-time favorite country artists. I'm not even that big a country fan, but John Prine is just one of the best songwriters I've ever heard in my life. And that particular album is really fun because it's a lot of duets. And I think the lead track, "In Spite of Ourselves," is such a cute, beautiful song. Definitely worth checking that out.
Awesome. Yeah, I've become aware of John Prine like since he died.
Oh yeah.
He's a guy that like everybody I knew who was a musician when he died was like, he was amazing. And I was like, I don't really know who that is. So and then also, I mean, so we'll talk about 69 Love Songs in a second. Yeah, I mean, the stuff I left off, like there's a Typo Negative album that came out.
Right.
Fucking John Mayer's debut came out that September. God help us all.
Was that Room for Squares?
No, it was the EP before that.
I see it.
Squares was like 2001, and then he released an EP warning us all of what was to come before that. Anyways, so 69 Love Songs is the sort of quintessential kind of college indie rock, like the Beatles' White Album. Right? Like at the time, literally everybody I knew who was into that very specific kind of genre of music loved it. I can't get through the whole thing. It is just endless, and some of them are like 1 minute long, and some of them are really, really good. There's a great song on that called "I'm Sorry I Love You," which is just one of my favorites. And like, it is clever because they are just so many different sort of genres of music that he's playing with. And so there's these like really sort of almost like 60s style kind of Beach Boys-y poppy love songs, and kind of everything in between. It is an accomplishment, but it is It's 23 songs per album. It is a mountain to climb. But if you had an indie rock girlfriend sometime in the early 2000s, I am sure you are familiar with 69 Love Songs. By the
one that I think you might have skipped over, but it was important to me in 1999 was the soundtrack to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
Oh, we'll get to that because we're going to talk about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater at the end. So, so hold that thought.
Okay.
Did you know, by the way, that one of the members of the Magnetic Fields, Daniel Handler, is better known by his pen name under which he wrote children's books, Lemony Snicket.
No kidding.
Yeah, there you go.
Did not know that.
Yeah, he wrote the what are they called? The Series of Unfortunate Events.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. Yep, that's him, and he is in that band. So there you go. All comes together. All right, let's talk about television because there's some interesting stuff happening here, including the debut of two monumental series at least, and some not monumental series, including shows where I'm like, I remember this existing, and it going away forever. The September 12th, or September 13th rather, the syndication debut of Blind Date, a movie that I watched all the time, or show I watched all the time in the afternoon, where people went on blind dates. Was terrible, but a lot of fun. And, there's been a million copycats of it since then. The Queen Latifah Show and the Martin Short Show also start on September the 13th in syndication. And Judge Mathis on September the 13th as well. Speaking of judges, Amy Brenneman's series Judging Amy, which goes on to some degree of success for a couple of years, is also debuts on September the 19th. And then ones that I completely forgotten about, the Mike O'Malley Show. I forgot he had a show named after him. Came out around the same time. Now and Again, also in September. Third Watch on NBC, a show that our nation's father-in-laws all watched. But the big ones, September the 22nd and September the 25th. September the 25th was the debut of the beloved Perfect One Season Freaks and Geeks, starring friend of the show, Sam Levine. A show we can talk about again in a second. And then also on September the 22nd, the game-changing, groundbreaking The West Wing by Aaron Sorkin, a quasi follow-up to his movie The American President, which, of course, has become one of the most beloved shows in television history, considered one of the greatest shows in television history by many people. Okay. Freaks and Geeks. Let's talk about this for a second. Have you seen Freaks and Geeks all the way through?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So here's my Freaks and Geeks take, and I'm with everybody who says NBC failed it, right? Like they completely sort of mismarketed it and everything else, and like it was a brilliant show, and how dare they, and cancellation is blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine, I get all of that. Here's the thing about Freaks and Geeks: that first season of it ends perfectly, and it is a perfectly told story, and I kind of don't want any more. Like I'm sort of like I'm left wanting more, and that's why I'm like, end it there, because this is like right where it should end. It's a perfect place.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with you on that. I think that everybody's story is left hanging, like it's all kind of like, okay, well, where are they going to go in the next season? But like, what makes it a perfect ending for me is not that what am I trying to say? What makes it a perfect ending is that everyone's in a good place at the end of that season. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They're not all like in turmoil, like, oh my God, what's going to happen to so-and-so? They've all kind of turned a corner in their lives and decided that this is the thing that they want to do now. And it's changed their status quo, like they've, you know, and so I'm happy for all of them for having found that for themselves. And the show ends, and now I get to think about like how much better their lives are because they had those moments, right? So just because it doesn't conclude doesn't make it an unsatisfying ending for me. I think it's perfect as is, as you do.
I sort of like my feeling about it, and I love The Bear, but my feeling about it was when I found out they were doing a second season of The Bear, and I was like, no. I was like, and of course, like I watched the hell out of it, and like we could talk about season 3 and whatever, but like it's still a wonderful show, and but I still had there was a little part of me died when I found out they were making a second season of The Bear, because the first season is such a perfect story. Like it ends in the exact right place, and I was like, you know, curtain, like let's leave it there. Don't touch it. It's a beautiful, perfect thing. And had it been canceled, I've been like, okay, great, like that's a perfect one season show. But yeah, it's unfortunate that Freaks and Geeks is a victim of cancellation, that they totally planned on doing more. But you know, there's shows of that era, like My So-Called Life, where it ends because ABC ended it because the ratings were so bad. But like it clearly had a lot more story to tell, and you know, it really is a tragedy that show ended too early. But
yeah, I think also the fact that like everybody from Freaks and Geeks for the most part went on to have prominent careers, you know, like most of them. It's like, well, I can't feel too sad because they all found success in other things.
Absolutely.
And so like maybe if they hadn't all become stars, then okay, well, maybe that show could have been their ticket to success.
Yeah.
But they found it, you know, even after just one season. So again, I think that just underlines why it didn't need to have more than one season.
And in the case of Franco, maybe not for the better, but whatever. Yeah, still,
sure.
Yeah. Between like Rogan and like Busy Phillips, and it's a good. The cast all did good things.
Yeah.
Fucking James Franco. The West Wing. All right, are you a West Wing fan? I feel like you're a West Wing guy. You're a West Wing fan.
I know I might seem like it. It's a show I've never actually watched.
Oh my god, that's crazy.
I know, and you know what it is. I think it comes down to like the timing, right? Again, I'm 12 years old when this comes on. This is not a show I give a shit about.
Sure.
And you know, I'm just now at 37 years old getting to The Sopranos. So like it was around that time when The West Wing was on, The Sopranos were on, and like all these shows, like this was sort of the beginning of like prestige television as I know it. And you know, so I was too young then, and now it's up to me to like go back and right that wrong and fix that. So The West Wing is one of those shows that I just haven't gotten to yet, but everyone I know who likes it, like loves it. And I know that it's a show that I will like when I get to it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not, there are bigger West Wing fans than me. Right. For sure. I mean, there are people who are just like, I know people who are just insane about it. And I think it's great. You know, it sort of goes on maybe a season too long or so and sort of lags in quality towards the end. But it is and still stands. Like it's still incredibly watchable, even in a kind of depressing sort of way, with how politics, especially right now, and, you know, how American politics have sort of what they've become, but also like capturing that sort of inadvertently capturing that just like pre and post 9/11 transition of the country. And 9/11 is like written into the show.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
You know, it's a hell of a historical time capsule. But I also think that The West Wing is one of 3 shows, The Sopranos being one, and then 24 being the other, that defined what was possible on television, in the creation of series. And all 3 of them were also made possible because of the idea of TV shows on DVD. And if that idea had not caught on, I don't think you could have a West Wing, where you have a show where it's so kind of intricately knotted together, and you really need to watch all of it, right? Like sort of in sequence. Not that it's like overwhelmingly serialized the way that 24 is, but certainly in the way where like the way the characters sort of evolve and their relationships evolve, and of course, you know, Aaron Sorkin's like intricate dialogue and all that sort of thing. You know, you're going to miss an episode, but a lot of people watched The West Wing on DVD. Like they bought the box sets when they came out, and that's how they ended up watching it. Right. And when with something like 24, I remember I started watching 24 and I had to give up after like the 5th episode because I forgot to like tape one of them. Had it not been for like getting the box set on DVD for Christmas, like I never would have gotten into that show, but I got it and could just watch them all in sequence. And then I was like, okay, this is how you watch that show. And it gave a different sort of revenue stream for a lot of these shows, right? That made, I think, prestige possible. And especially with The Sopranos, where like a bunch of people didn't have HBO, but they could spend $20 on the box set for the season, right? And like, or rent it from Blockbuster, and like, you know, that's a weird thing. But people were not renting television shows before like 1999. It was not a thing. You didn't rent them from Blockbuster. It wasn't available.
I was just about to ask. Like I thought I remembered. You know, TV seasons being rentable at Blockbuster.
They were, yeah. But it was towards the heyday, like the you know the twilight of Blockbuster that became a thing.
And then Netflix jumped in, and you could get TV on Netflix. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly right. So yeah. Anyway, of course, that enters into the annals of television history. And speaking of television, I don't understand the Emmys, but whatever reason, the 51st Primetime Emmy Awards are held on September the 12th, 1999. Okay, I think the way the Emmys work is that they are honoring the previous television season, which used to be September through May. Right? Because like with the Oscars, you're like, okay, 2003. Like it's January to December. Very, very, very straightforward. The Emmys are always like in the fall, and they seem to not like so when The Bear won all of those Emmys this year, was that for season 3 or 2? Like, I don't even know. Like, what are we on? I don't know what is being honored at any given time. I'm pretty sure it was season 3. I don't really understand it. Anyway.
I don't follow the Emmys really, but I want to say that it was the second season of The Bear, so I think season 3 is still, you know, potentially up for awards.
Well, there you go.
I think you're right. I think it would be like September to May, because then summer it's all like, you know, reruns. Every show
or used to be, not anymore. Now it doesn't make any sense. Now it's just sort of like there are no seasons anymore. Just shows come out whenever. You know, in 2024, but. Anyhow, the 51st annual Primetime Emmy Awards, hosted by Jenna Elfman and David Hyde Pierce, talk about 2 late 90s celebrities hosting a TV show. The most awards go to The Practice with 3, and the most nominations, and this is why I said I don't really understand how the Emmys work, go to The Sopranos, which came out 9 months earlier. So I don't know. I guess. Sure.
Yeah. I wish I could make sense of it for you.
Well, the whole season of The Sopranos had concluded by the time the Emmys, so whatever. Anyway, Edie Falco becomes the first actress from a cable network, or indeed the first person from any cable television show to win a major acting award. One of what would prove to be several awards, as The Sopranos would be showered with awards. For the rest of the evening, television writer David E. Kelly was the big winner of the night, splitting a bunch of awards for The Practice and its sister show, the comedy drama Ally McBeal, which went on to win Outstanding Comedy Series for the year as well. Okay, so that's what's happening in television. A couple more things to talk about, and we have some video game news, as I alluded to earlier in this episode. 2 big things happen in September in video games. On the 9th, Sega makes its final pitch for the console market with the Dreamcast. Considered by many to be one of the best consoles of all time, it still failed to make a dent in the marketplace, then dominated by Sony and Nintendo, eventually leading Sega to become a software-only company and the realization of the once unthinkable Mario and Sonic in the same video games somehow. Its most popular game, Soul Calibur, is released at launch. Did you ever play Dreamcast? Dreamcast guy?
No, I didn't. What did I have in 99? Probably still playing my Nintendo 64.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's still one of the two big systems at the time. So what was weird about so if you grew up in the 90s or like spent a lot of your adolescence in the 90s as I did, it was Sega Nintendo from 1986 through essentially 1996 for like 10 solid years. The Master System and the NES, of course, won out enormously, but then Sega came in with the Genesis a couple years later, and Nintendo responds with the Super Nintendo, and the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis thing lasts for several years, and there's this bitter console war between the two of them. But what Sony figured out with the PlayStation that Sega never did was that Sega's popularity was only ever not Nintendo, right? Sega never had a brand loyalty. It was always, this is the system that isn't the Nintendo system. And then Sony comes along and it's like, we can do that, right? Like we can be the cool, edgy, not Nintendo system. And I think Sega sort of misunderstood its own sort of fan base, and really sort of, it came out with the Saturn, which was a really good system, but like it didn't have enough third-party support. Like it just was not producing software fast enough. And Sony had already been like, here's this cool, edgy new thing, and people had flocked over to them. So by the time the Dreamcast comes out, which genuinely was like a very good system, it was just sleek, and like the graphics engine was fantastic, and it had some really, really great games, unique games that you couldn't play anywhere else. But like, 3 people I knew had one. And like I
knew one person who had a Dreamcast.
Everybody knows a Dreamcast guy. Yeah, there's always one.
I don't even have memories of playing it. I don't think my hands have ever touched a Dreamcast.
It had a weird ass controller, I'll say that much. But Soul Calibur is still one of the greatest fighting games of all time, and man, that was a ton of fun to play on the Dreamcast. But Sega was smart. I mean, they knew that they had lost the console market, especially when Microsoft came in and like found another space in the market with Xbox, and they're like, what are we doing wrong? And they kind of concluded that they just make great games, and so they're just, they became a third party licensee, and that's what they've been doing ever since. But yeah, that was the death of Sega as a video game console company. And also on September the 29th, and just a few months after its namesake completed the first 900, Activision uncorks a phenomenon with the initial release of the first Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. The franchise would go on to produce bestseller after bestseller, year after year, and sequel after sequel until its 2007 de facto finale, Tony Hawk's Proving Ground. A remastered version of the first 2 games was released in 2020 for modern consoles, although I admit I have not played the remastered version of it yet. What was your Tony Hawk's game?
The original Pro Skater, I played the shit out of that game. and I loved it so much that I also bought it for Game Boy Color.
You mean Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance? Because I remember the Game Boy Advance version of it. I remember there being
I had it for Game Boy Color.
Oh my god, what was that like? The Game Boy Advance one was cool because it was like the 3/4 overhead view kind of game. It was a very different sort of game, right? But like, yeah, that was a lot of fun.
It was a wild experience. It's been a while. I mean, I haven't played it in so long, but I do remember having both versions and really enjoying. But obviously, the Nintendo 64 version was superior. But for when I was in the car with my parents, I had a version of the game that I could just just immerse myself in.
Mine were 3 was 3 by far is the one that I played the most, that I think is the best in the franchise. 3, 4, and I think Underground was the one after 4. Those are the 3 that I played the most.
I played some Underground. I might have gotten Underground for GameCube though.
Okay. Yeah. 3 is a game where like I got a message on the screen basically telling me like there's nothing left.
You have done all there is to do.
So
Your first time
like,
100%ing a game?
Yeah, so it would do like this unlocked, this unlocked, this unlocked, and it was like all things unlocked, and it's like please go do something else. And I was like, no. Yeah, the first time a game has told me to like please stop playing it because there's nowhere to go from here. I remember one time so there's a really great level. My favorite level in Tony Hawk 3 is the airport.
Okay,
And
yeah.
there's this great part of the airport where you can rail down the escalator and then you can go around the baggage claim. So you go like you rail down the escalator, you do it like a flip trick onto the baggage claim, then you jump off of it and you go back up the escalator. I might have told this story on this podcast before, but I'm gonna tell it again anyways. So what I did was I had perfect rail on, so I could not fall down.
Sure.
And I built up a ton of combo points, and then I landed a rail on the baggage claim, which is just a circle. It's a carousel. So if you just stay on there with perfect rail, like you can't fall off. And so all that happens is just like points start accumulating like in crazy ways. And so then I turned the TV off and like went out for a few hours, and then I came back and the score like literally didn't fit on the screen. It was like 1 billion something points.
Dear God.
But I also had to land it. So after doing that all that time, I also had to jump off the baggage claim and like carefully land so as not to lose those points, which I did. But yeah, that was easily the like dumbest thing I've ever done in a video game before. But
that's amazing. Yeah, that first game though, like in addition to the game just being so great, the soundtrack, I know people my age, still like remember that soundtrack as being kind of
sure.
instrumental in like what became our music tastes as adults. Like as I got into high school, I started listening to more punk music, and stuff. So like I some days I'll listen to that old soundtrack and I'll just be like, oh man, yeah, this is where it started. Listening to fucking Goldfinger or whatever.
Yep.
So yeah, in addition to the game being great, the soundtrack was also really fantastic. And I think what's awesome about the whole line of Tony Hawk games is that they've also continued to put out really solid soundtracks for each of their games. It's not just throwaway music. They realize people love that first game's music and then have just curated really great stuff for each subsequent game. So
yeah, I remember 3 had like the Ace of Spades.
Yeah.
There's some Dead Kennedys on there for sure. I can't remember what it was. Tony Hawk 1 had the Dead Kennedys, the Ernies, Goldfinger, Primus, Suicidal Tendencies, the Vandals. Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, those are great soundtracks. Was there actually like a CD? Could you buy the soundtrack CD?
As far as I know, yeah. I don't think I owned it.
Yeah.
I wasn't really buying CDs at the time, but I remember there being an album.
There is a Spotify playlist, the complete Tony Hawk's Pro Skater soundtrack. You can get it. Oh, man. Yeah, it was good stuff. All right, so we are almost done, but 2 more things I want to very quickly talk about. So as September comes to an end, we are heading into the fall and the final months of 1999, which means the end of the world Y2K anxiety is starting to ramp up, and that gets a push with 2 major earthquakes that happen in September, a 6.0 in Athens, that kills 143 people and injures somewhere north probably of 1,000, leaving 50,000 people homeless. And then on September the 21st, what's called the 921 earthquake, a magnitude 7.6, which is real big, kills 2,400 people in Taiwan. So if you were of the group of Christian end times dominionists who believed that the world was going to end on January the 1st, 2000, and thinks that things like earthquakes are precursor to that, you got two big ones that happened in September of that year. And then also on September the 20th, just after Athens has this earthquake, the Greek stock market crashes in 1989, and Greece enters into a very prolonged economic downturn, bordering on depression for like a decade or so. Yeah. So not a great time in Greece. But of course, the omens of God's wrath, which led to the eventual end of the world in 2000, were already well present.
What was your take on the Y2K phenomenon at the time? Because I was in 6th grade, so I had a very different experience with it, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I had a unique window into it because my dad is a computer scientist and has been since basically that field has existed. So he graduated from Cambridge University. He was the first class of people from Cambridge to graduate with that degree. Like they didn't have it before his graduating class. So he was working at Microsoft at the time, right? So I knew from him sort of like where things stood, and he will tell you to this day, right? Like that people get what happened in Y2K wrong, which is to say that people basically are like, that nothing happened, so it was no big deal. And he's like, but that's not the story. Like it was a really big deal. Like nothing happened because a lot of people worked really hard to prevent something from happening, doing the like grunt work behind the scenes. And some of them may be more like apocalyptic, visions of all of the, power grids on Earth going out were probably overwrought. But like, it would have been a catastrophic thing had people not done the hard work to work on it. And it's the classic case of like, the surest success that you've done something right here is like nothing happening. And it's like, it's very contrary to human interpretation. Like we want to see things happen to justify, right, to like validate the thing that we did. But like a lot of like, it's like the problem with fighting climate change. Like what you want is for like the terrible things to not happen, but like it's hard to see terrible things not happening because you don't sort of see the counterfactual. But he's very clear that like, this was a really big problem. But I also knew sort of at the time, because he was very aware of sort of what was going on with the work to deal with it, that pretty late into the year, like around this time of the year for sure, I had a good sense from him that like, it's taken care of for the most part. There might be a few systems here and there that go offline or get confused or whatever it is, but like it will be sporadic. But yeah, I mean, it was genuinely a source of incredible anxiety for people, as many documentaries in the meantime have made clear. People were really afraid of it and really thought that like once midnight hit, they'd have to go underground for several years or whatever. But it's interesting. There's actually a really good documentary that just came out on HBO, I think last year, which I think is called Time Bomb 1999, or Time Bomb Y2K. I think Time Bomb Y2K. Came out in 2023, and it's a really excellent like look at exactly what happened and how it unhappened, and like the computer scientists behind it not happening, but then also like the the weirdo Christians who like took advantage of it as an apocalyptic like rallying cry or whatever. But people were going crazy, man. It was weird.
I don't think I ever really had a frame of reference for what the big deal was.
Yeah.
Definitely not at the time. I was too busy, at my local skating rink listening to Millennium. And like, hanging out with kids from school. But like when I saw Office Space actually, and he was explaining the work they were doing, updating software to make the 2000 Switch, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what everybody was afraid of, but like there were these people all over the place doing that work.
Yep.
You know, Mike Judge just worked it into this little workplace comedy. And so like that, I think, was the first time I realized just why people were so concerned about it becoming the year 2000.
Yeah.
So yeah, certainly not at the time. I was just like, I know it's this thing people are worried about. It's like, you know, people getting all freaked out about 2012 and the end of the world, and you know, like every other,
right,
you know,
which was like much less rooted in anything.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly perceived it, but I'm like, nothing's gonna happen, you know, like,
yeah.
So yeah, I'm just, you know, dancing with girls to Cisco's Incomplete, you know, like I'm busy doing that stuff.
Sure.
So
yeah, well, what the funny thing is that if you remember, like a couple months ago, like late summer, there was that system error that happened somewhere where like just a bunch of airports like shut down, and I can't remember what the actual cause of it was, but like was it Cisco? No, not like that.
Oh, not that Cisco.
The company
Okay.
Cisco. Yeah. I think it was a bunch of their systems. Do you remember this? This was like in like July or August. There were people like stranded at airports for like days.
Yes.
Yeah. And so someone who actually worked on Y2K was like, yeah, this is pretty much what we were afraid of. Like, this is pretty much what we thought a sort of bad case scenario would be, is exactly this. So here you go. Here's your actual Y2K, like, you know, playing out in real life in 2024. So, yeah, I think even like the people who were like less alarmist about it were like, yeah, it's that sort of thing that we're kind of worried about. But like, it can happen anytime because computers are fallible and people fuck up and like press the wrong buttons, and that is just sort of the way things are. But yeah, no, people were fucking freaked out all the time. Like, and it wasn't even so much just like the Y2K bug, but it was just the idea of like this new, you know, year that began with a 2 that just nobody had seen for 1,000 years. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. But I do remember it kind of feeling biblical in
for sure,
in its scale. You know, it's like this is going to be the end times.
Oh yeah. I mean, like the years leading up to it, they could write books about this, but like the way that sort of evangelical end times Christians like harped on it was insane. I mean, like the book The Bible Code like came out a couple years earlier, right? Yeah, so like they fucking loved this shit, and they were squeezing every penny they could out of the idea that like some arbitrary shift in the date was like Jesus's cue to come back and reign Armageddon or whatever. I don't know. I don't understand. I have a degree in religion and I don't understand what the fuck is going on there. So, you know, I don't know how anybody else possibly could. Anyhow, that's September. Fun month. All right, what's coming up? What's coming up in? You just released the weird mummy movie with Tom Cruise.
Yep. Yeah. So The Monsters That Made Us has just released it's like the Mummy / Dark Universe. We're not really going to be doing a proper Dark Universe episode. I figured we would do everything we're going to do with that in this one episode. So that's what we did. But also, we have, for the past couple weeks, we have been doing like a collaborative project with another podcast called Development Hell over on Dread Central. Mm-hmm. So Josh Korngut, the host of that show, is the managing editor of dreadcentral.com. He reached out to us to do like a 4-part Dark Universe series, and it just happened to line up with our release of The Mummy, our episode. So we've released 2 episodes. We did our Mummy episode. We did The Invisible Man. We just recorded Frankenstein, which will be out by the time this is out. And then I don't know if we're revealing what the 4th episode is, so I'll keep that to myself. But yeah, so that's happening also, but all that's being released on the Development Hell feed, so that's all available everywhere you get your podcasts. So if you want to hear Mike and I talk about The Mummy a bunch, you can listen to our show, listen to that show, and then we expand on not just the Dark Universe in what could have been, but like other things that came out like in that vein. So like, for example, when we did our Frankenstein episode, we worked in a movie called May from 2002, which kind of gets into the, it sort of borrows this Frankenstein idea of creating a friend in a really weird, quirky way. So Yeah, we talk about not just Dark Universe, but kind of the greater legacies of those characters and how they've impacted more recent releases. So yeah, that's what's going on with me on The Monsters That Made Us and elsewhere.
Cool. We'll be back on Monday with a new episode. We'll be talking about the movie that Brian Helgeland wrote and directed and then got fired from because of Mel Gibson, Payback. And we're going to be ripping off the Let's Talk About Mel Gibson finally Band-Aid. So tune in for that one. That should be fun. You can email us at 1999@cageclub.me. Find us on the Instagrams and the Twitters and the Blue Spaces, Blue Skies, whatever it is. 1999 the podcast. That's where we are. All those places. Yeah, drop by, say hello, check us out. And we'll have a special announcement on Monday as well, so that's exciting. Tune in then, and thanks, Dan. A lot of fun, and everybody will be back for another one of these in a couple weeks. And